Canadians are on the move. It's called interprovincial migration, and in the past 5 years, it has taken off. Provinces like Alberta, British Columbia, and Nova Scotia have seen an influx in people moving from neighboring provinces to start a new life, with most interprovincial migrants coming from Ontario. Provinces like Alberta are making sure they market all their province has to offer.
I'm standing in front of something that a lot of folks in Toronto or Vancouver don't get to see very often. The yard of a single-family home. That's because the price of a detached home in Canada's two biggest cities has simply become out of reach for many families. But you know, the average cost of a detached home here in Edmonton or down in Calgary is about 1/3 the price of what it is in the Greater Toronto or Greater Vancouver areas.
Between July 1st, 2021 and June 30th, 2022, over 14,000 more people came to Nova Scotia from other provinces or territories than left the province itself. And during the height of the pandemic, 9,970 people migrated from Ontario to Nova Scotia between October 20th and March 2021. Alberta also gained over 19,000 people due to interprovincial migration in the third quarter of 2022 alone. So why are people moving?
So why do I think that people are coming here to Nova Scotia? Well, I think the rural and the urban mix. I think we have a really unique rural and urban lifestyle here. So you can be in a very like a busy city and then drive 15 minutes along the coast and be in a fishing village. So where else do you get that?
Today on Context, the Great Relocation, the migration to Eastern Canada. Welcome to Context. I'm Maggie John. We are overlooking downtown Halifax, the hub of one of the fastest growing provinces in our country, Nova Scotia. Thousands of people are moving here every single year, and one man even made a TV show about it.
Welcome to Fort Nova.
Known for his social media handle, Reggie from the Road, thousands have followed the Ontario native for years as he traveled across North America, sharing his adventures. But when the pandemic hit, Reggie, like many of us, couldn't travel, so he made Nova Scotia his home. Why do you think people are moving to Nova Scotia?
I think it has a lot to do with just it's affordable.
Yeah.
Like quality of life and what you can get, what your dollar can get you. I have a 1860 farmhouse
Wow.
on 127 acres. It cost me $150,000.
No.
Yeah, when I say that to
You
people
said
from
120, how many
127 acres, which is 99 football fields.
Wow.
And $150,000.
Wow.
You say like that piece of property in Ontario would be worth millions.
Yeah. A lot of people are moving to Calgary as well. What do you think about the quality of life that is different in Ontario than it is maybe in Nova Scotia or in a Calgary or other places in the country that people maybe are looking for or seeking for?
Yeah, I feel like a lot more down to earth people outside of Ontario. Ontario's great, but it feels cold at times.
Yeah.
Like I love Toronto. I love that it's like a crayon box. You go outside, everybody looks different. Everyone has their own style.
Yeah.
But it's also a little bit cold because it's so many people jammed into one place.
Okay, but we are meeting you today in Ontario.
This is true.
So tell us what brought you back home.
I had a full out like mental breakdown because going out there, I always joked with people. They were like, oh my God, you're so brave to make that move because I made it all by myself, not knowing anybody in the province.
Yeah.
And for 2 years, I thought that's what I wanted, to be alone, to be isolated. And after 2 years, I broke and I went, I need the people I love.
Yeah.
I need my friends, and I can't be away for this long. So I did 2 years straight in my house.
Yeah.
And it broke me down. It broke me down. I don't know that many people. I don't identify as well with, like, I'm a creative person. I work in filmmaking.
Yeah.
And to be in Toronto is one thing, to be surrounded by similar people. But being out there in the middle of nowhere, like they're all fishermen. They're all like, you know, these great farm down to earth people, but it's like, I wasn't getting enough of kind of the people I identify with, which was really isolating and difficult for me.
So will you go back to Nova Scotia? Is that still your home?
That's a great question, because so many people from Ontario who I've been talking to and venting to are like, you don't have to go back there. Like, you did it for 2 years, maybe that's it. But I did meet a woman who I think is the love of my life from Nova Scotia, which is really sweet. And she and I are figuring out how we can relationship together and figure out how we can homestead together.
Yeah.
And it was just a lot for me.
Yeah.
But I figure if when I find my partner, which I have, I figure things will start to kind of fall into place.
Ron Funnell and Kim Dempsey have seen things fall into place for them. Like Reggie, they moved to Nova Scotia in the height of the pandemic. For them, it boiled down to one thing: kindness. They now live in a small community called Nikto Falls, about 2 hours outside of Halifax. We connected over Zoom.
Kim and I lived in a city in Ontario, and to be honest, we found that the kindness was just nowhere to be found. We found a lot of people were being very unkind in public, in retail, with each other, with store clerks, other customers, and we just really found that to be so draining. And we had come out to Nova Scotia in March. We are very close to an aunt and uncle that live here in Berwick, my Auntie Adela and Uncle Bill.
And as well, I have a friend, a lifelong friend, Pam Mingo, who about 5 or 6 years ago said, why don't you guys come and move out here? Like, look around. And I had come out on business. So that planted the seed for us.
Yeah, so I find that interesting. So kindness, just being able to just associate with people and seeing kindness in people was a reason why you moved. And also, you had mentioned in a previous call that mental health also played a role during COVID. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. There was a specific incident in our home city in Ontario where Kim had gone to the grocery store and was really in the height of COVID, trying to navigate through the store, and people were having a really difficult time. And someone in the checkout line took it upon himself to yell quite a few obscenities at Kim because she was trying to help people out. And Kim came home and said, we can't do this anymore. This is so unhealthy.
Yeah.
You know, when you go out for a shopping excursion, you shouldn't come home in tears after that experience. So, you know, from that point, we immediately went to online grocery ordering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Curbside pickup. You know, in our renovation business, that's not totally avoidable when it comes to retail. You know, lots of trips to the lumber store, and we experienced the same thing there too. And, you know, we often would want to step in and say, like, just be kind, just be nicer to that cashier. It's not their fault. And, you know, anytime that we did, Maggie, people just shot right back at us, and we went, we're just trying to diffuse the situation. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that, you know, every action has a reaction. So how we treat others dictates how they treat others around them. So
now, you know, I know there are kind people and unkind people everywhere. And I'm sure that you've probably stumbled across some unkind people in Nova Scotia as well. But what is it about Nova Scotia now living here since last summer that is very different maybe than Ontario?
Two things off the top. There's eye contact here, and people, they take an interest, a genuine interest, and I think that's the first thing you notice. It's like, oh, you're talking to me, you're asking me, you're interested. Whereas I think we both felt in Ontario that we just had to go about our business, and you'd never have the chance meetings where, you know, meeting new people or new situations, even in spite of trying to put ourselves in that position. So
question.
It's just been so easy and welcoming. And as well, I think it's the balance here too between work and life.
So have you met other Ontarians who have moved out here? I mean, we're hearing of thousands of people specifically from Ontario that are moving to Nova Scotia, but obviously around the country as well. They're calling it interprovincial migration. Have you met others that are also looking for the quality of life that you've talked about?
100%, Maggie. When Kim and I moved here in June, we planned the summer off so that we could get the opportunity to really get to know our backyard, get to know the province. And it seemed like so many people we ran into, business owners in particular. So where are you guys from? Oh, we moved from Niagara Falls 3 years ago. We bought this business. Best decision we ever made. Further down towards Digby, same discussion with another couple. We met a couple, lovely couple. They've become friends of ours. They own cottages at a place called Smith's Cove. He was a sergeant with Toronto Police for 30 years. His wife was a detective. I can well imagine that they got to that point where they said, okay, it's enough. And he said, we couldn't take it anymore either. So they took retirement and they moved here. And he said, it's the best decision we ever made.
Yeah, they're having a blast.
We hear that from so many people. And then on our business side, you know, many of our customers, as we, you know, introduce ourselves, they'll say, so whereabouts are you guys from in Ontario? We share that and they say, oh, well, we're from Elora or we're from Kitchener-Waterloo.
Last question for you, Ron. You said was your home. So you're speaking about Ontario in the past tense. So will you ever go back to Ontario?
To visit.
To visit
Yeah.
regularly.
But not to relocate. You know, in a perfect world, we will see even more of the family relocate here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ron and Kim, for your time today.
Thank
My
you
pleasure.
so much.
Audra Williams and her husband Haritha also moved to Nova Scotia from Ontario. For them, the decision came down to a number of reasons, including the price of a home. They purchased the Port Grocer in Port Medway, Nova Scotia, and are in the midst of renovating the iconic grocery store that has been in the center of the community in the small town for years.
I had lived in Nova Scotia for my 20s, and I had only left because I had a hard time finding work, and I'd always wanted to come back. And my husband, Haritha, had never been to Nova Scotia, but the pandemic was kind of like a reset button for everybody, and all of my work at that point had gone remote, and Haritha's work, with the pandemic, we have an alcohol-free cocktail company that had shut down, so it just opened up possibilities. And so we came in September, and we had a little kind of like 1 week of exploring the province, and I told Haritha that he got to choose where we were going to live because he's a person of color, like he grew up in cities, like I felt like I could be fine anywhere, but like, I wanted him to feel a place was home. So the South Shore really felt like home to him. And this building was the first real estate listing we saw like a year ago when we decided to move here in the first place. And it just so happened that it was still available when we were able to buy a place of our own.
And tell us what this building is.
So this is the Port Grocer. I think the legal name is the Port Medway Grocer Cafe and Art Space. Okay. And it's a 100-year-old building that has been a pottery studio. People say that they got like their ears pierced in the kitchen when that was a hair salon. Someone's like, oh, we live in the apartment upstairs, but I guess that used to be someone's like law firm. Like it's just been this community building in this little town of 250 people for about 100 years. And so most recently it was the Port Grocer. So the front of the building was a grocery store, and the back was a cafe. And also art space, community gathering spot. And then in the backyard, there's a community garden that the whole community comes and works at every Saturday, but then also kind of like throughout the week too. It's like someone would just kind of walk in and walk out with some tomatoes, and it's just like, wow. Yeah, it's heaven.
And so it's going to be opening in a couple of weeks. Yep. And so what is the space going to be now?
Well, we're hoping to continue like what everyone loved about the Grocer. We will bring our own kind of twist to it, and some of the things we really are hoping to be able to do is like have like a tool lending library and like rent out bikes and just make it like a community asset even more than it already was. So in my dream, we're also like printing recipe books of like local recipes, things like that, and we just really want it to be like a community resource.
Yeah. Tell me about the conversation you had with your husband about moving from Toronto, at very different pace of life, everything, to Nova Scotia, and just maybe even the decision-making process of saying we're going to pick up everything and move here.
Absolutely. Well, there was a day that he came home from running errands, and at that point, we were renting commercial kitchen space, renting storage space, and trying to kind of run this business. And he just is like, "This city's trying to kill me." And he's not a dramatic person, but he just felt like, like Toronto was just becoming like impossible, which was very heartbreaking. And I often say that it's a city that we love that didn't love us back. Not us in particular, just like everyone we knew, and like friends were leaving, and like houses around us were selling for millions of dollars. And folks were saying, "Oh, the bubble's going to break." But it was just like, if this house goes from being $2 million to $1 million, that doesn't help us. So we just were kind of like looking at listings and daydreaming, and it was just, the things that you kind of respond to, I think is like a nice way to kind of like check in with yourself. And so when we saw like this exact listing, and all of a sudden it was like, we could do this and we could do that, and looking at the town, and it's so lovely. And so we did make that like preliminary week-long foray, and I had no idea how that was going to go, because he could get here and be like, "No, thank you." Like, everybody's white and there's ticks. Like, I want no part of this. But he just like kind of uncoiled as soon as we got here, and he was just like, "This feels like home to me." And so we, as soon as we had the chance, we kind of jumped on it.
One thing that we've heard a lot from people who have moved from Ontario to Nova Scotia specifically is the kindness of people out here as well. And just the sense of, throughout the pandemic, that kind of was stripped away from back home. And so that's something that has really surfaced to the top. What does that say about, just what people are looking for when it comes to quality of life? It's not necessarily being close to where you work and the accessibility, but maybe just the value of community and being around people that you like and that you get along with.
Absolutely. And I think that, I think that's one thing about it being so small, is like, it's small enough that you can kind of have an impact, and it's small enough that like everyone's kind of, invested. And it's also small enough that like there's no anonymity, like good or bad. And so when we first were looking at, even when we realized we had gotten the funding to buy the place, we didn't know where we were going to stay kind of, while we were setting up. And then like someone's like, "Oh, well, Sheena across the street, like I think she's, visiting her mom or going kayaking or whatever." And so like next thing we know, like we've got keys to her place, and like we're staying there while we set up here. And it's just I don't know, like I guess there's I guess it's easier to be generous when there isn't the same scarcity. And so I think that when you are feeling like you're in a city that's trying to kill you, I think people can struggle to be generous, because there's that the kind of panic. But I think if people have enough, then I think that they're more able. Which isn't to say they have a lot, but it's just that like enough to share. So being able to not make choices out of like scarcity, but just possibility, I think is a gift of being in a place where it's survivable, no matter what.
Coming up, how does a province like Nova Scotia deal with the influx of population, as well as the impact on infrastructure and social agencies? We visit one food bank that's giving the gift of dignity through the process.
In our fast-paced world, context is everything to the stories that are shaping us. We want to go beyond the headlines in our new podcast to create space for meaningful conversations, to explore where faith intersects with justice, ethics, culture, and society. We'll be joined by newsmakers, peacemakers, and culture shapers. Join us on all podcast platforms or at contextbeyondtheheadlines.com.
I spoke to Trish Purdy, a city councillor in Halifax, about the growth she has seen in the province and the cost of inviting the world to your doorstep. We connected in between council meetings over Zoom. The provincial government has spent millions of dollars promoting the province as being a place that is affordable as well. But some have said that it's getting a little harder to find housing. Do you find that because of the influx that Nova Scotia might not be prepared for the influx of people coming into the province?
Yes, that's definitely one aspect of it. I think it's a comedy of errors actually all happening at once. But yes, so the housing has not kept up with the immigration here in HRM, Nova Scotia. The government has been aggressively promoting our province. They've announced they want to double our population by 2060. So that is a big aggressive goal for the province. And so they are really, no holds barred on development. They want fast and furious. So our housing starts for this year are we're expecting 8,000 housing starts in Nova Scotia this year. In previous years, past decade average, it's been 4,300. So we're almost doubling the housing starts. I know our mayor is going to be promoting Halifax for skilled workers, trade workers all over the world, and developers are willing to build housing for the workers. Like we just need to bring people in, and let's get this infrastructure built. So the excitement is definitely building.
But what does that mean for those living on the margins and social agencies like the Brunswick City Mission that helps them? Housed in a local church in downtown Halifax, every day they serve many street-involved people and those simply struggling to make ends meet by taking a different approach to how a food bank operates. So, Matt, we're here at the Brunswick Street Mission Food Bank, and tell us what happens here.
Sure, yeah. So in June, we started a choice model food bank for folks in Halifax who need some more food security in their lives.
Yeah.
And what the idea behind this is to provide food for families, for individuals, for those who are unhoused, and provide them the dignity of choice. So the idea that we're doing here is folks can walk through the food bank. They have shopping carts.
Yeah.
They push those through with a volunteer. And depending on the size of your family, you have a number of points to work with.
Okay.
So they're able to go through the food bank, pick out the items that work for their family, work for their diet, work for their cultural needs,
Yeah.
and just have the choice as though they're walking through a superstore.
Now, we're familiar, obviously, with food banks. They're all across our country, but the formula has always been more of a box. So, you give a box to a family, and it has food that is kind of pre-chosen. Why do this? Why make it kind of a shopping experience for people?
One of our mandates, one of our missions is actually to provide dignity and to ensure dignity in our community. So it's what we wanted to focus on. We were running the box program where we were providing foods to people, pre-hampering them and giving them out into the community room there. But we found a lot of foods weren't needed, weren't wanted. Some families were taking home foods that they didn't really want, but they knew it was given to them.
Yeah.
So
the obligation of having to keep it and take it.
Yeah. So we really wanted to make sure that they had the choice to select the items that really fit their needs.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about this point system. I think it's brilliant. So, we'll see, maybe over here,
we'll start
canned
here,
goods, 2 points. So when I come in, when one of your clients come in, how many points do they have?
So individuals will get 80 points.
Okay.
If you're an unhoused person, you'll get 40 points.
Okay.
And the reason for that is if you're housed, you're eligible to come every 3 weeks.
Okay.
If you're unhoused, you're eligible to come every week. Okay. So this allows those who are living in tents or temporary shelters or in hotel rooms even, the ability to choose foods that they don't have to cook. And they're able to come every week to pick out foods that will get them through another week.
Okay.
And unfortunately, there's been a huge rise of homelessness in Halifax. And so we've seen that in the food bank itself. And so the point system works. Once you have your points, you're able to walk through. Everything will be tallied up as you go.
Yep.
Our volunteers have those little clickers,
Okay.
and you count people coming into a concert or something.
Yep.
And they just tally up their points until either they meet their limit of the number of points they have, or they're satisfied with the foods that they get. Okay. So not everybody will max out on points.
Right.
Sometimes they're satisfied if they have 80 points with 60.
Right.
They found what they need to get through for the next little while.
Now you just said something. You've seen homelessness rise in Nova Scotia. Tell me a little bit about that, because we are seeing this influx of people coming to this province, but that doesn't mean the problems go away, right?
Right. Yeah, it is an increasing challenge in Halifax, I think in a lot of cities. And it's a challenge that really is encapsulated by the growing needs that we see in the social services, in the networks that we have in this community with other agencies. That we have tent cities popping up in different areas, the city's designated areas for tents specifically, and it still continues to grow. There is just definite need for systemic resolution to this because it's not sustainable. We're heading into winter. You and I were talking earlier how bad how cold it is here.
Cold.
And it's a wet cold. So even I ran into one of our clients at a bus shelter the other day. He lives in a tent, but he didn't want to be in his tent because it was wet and it was humid in his tent. So he was in a bus shelter, just kind of killing time. It's unsustainable. And that's across Canada, but we're definitely feeling it in our organization here.
And so how do you, food prices are going up, which makes it hard for everyone, even if you're housed or not. And so how do you run a place like this, a food bank like this, and keep, these shelves stocked when food prices are going up and you're dependent on people's goodwill of donating food as well as grants and so forth?
It's a challenge. We're fortunate to have a large organization, Feed Nova Scotia, in this province that provides food on a weekly basis to us, but it's still not enough for our needs. So we've seen about a 3 times increase in need in number of clients coming to our food banks over last year.
Wow.
So that's huge.
3 times increase of need. 3 times.
3 times increase.
Wow.
It's huge. It became to the point in the summer where we almost had some fights outside as we opened the doors. And so it's just
people trying to get in.
Right? It's the food security need in Halifax is huge. So we do have foods from Feed Nova Scotia coming in. Generous donors do provide food. We had some home-baked cookies dropped off this morning. We had some groceries dropped off this morning. And then the rest we're able to supplement through grants, which there are some generous grantors out there. They don't last. So right now we're spending about $1,800 a week just to supplement what we get from the donations. And it's not a permanent solution for us here. Food banks aren't a permanent solution. They were designed to sort of get through some difficult economic struggles back years ago, and we're still here. So it's not a need that's going away. We would love to work ourselves out of a job here, but it's not going to be possible.
Let's talk about here. You are housed in a church. So tell me about that and how the church has allowed this space to be used for this purpose.
So this church was built in the 1800s. I'm not sure exactly when. But the idea of what we're doing here has always been part of the church's mandate historically. So we're in a united church here since 1860. So it used to be something called the Edward Yost Mission. And then through different transitions, we've moved and migrated to Brunswick Street Missions. So we're no longer fully affiliated with United Church. We're housed, they support us here, they support us financially, and we're able to do our work because of the historical connection we have to United Church. But in order to really meet the needs of the diversity in our community, we're distinct from the United Church itself.
Interprovincial migration is a fascinating thing. As we've seen throughout this show, Nova Scotia has seen a positive increase in its population. So has Calgary and so has Vancouver. But with it also comes the pressure on infrastructure and on social agencies. And the question is, can a city, can a province handle it? Let us know what you think of today's topic. Join the conversation on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. For all of us here, I'm Maggie John. See you next time.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a supporter-funded nonprofit organization and member of the Canadian Centre for Christian Charities. Thanks to faithful people like you, we are able to continue producing context. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 4M2, or visit crossroads.ca to learn more about our programs.
Context Beyond the Headlines digs deeper into the critical issues of our age and in the process finds hope amidst our 24/7 news cycle. We are so excited about our brand new season and the launch of a brand new podcast as we go beyond the headlines, finding the connection between faith, justice, culture, society, and ethics. Our goal is to reach a broader audience with relevant stories that will provoke conversation.
Things are starting to change because the world demanded it.
Some of the issues we'll be covering this season: hidden homelessness, vaccine passports, racial injustice, and so much more.
It affects every single one of us, no matter where we live.
As we move forward with this brand new season and the launch of this brand new podcast, would you consider partnering with Context financially? It is because of the generosity of viewers like you that we're able to continue to tell the stories that matter.